I was researching farmers markets in Michigan, looking at their demographic characteristics and how they can be used to mitigate food insecurity in Michigan. For like if they offer food access programs like SNAP and like SNAP EBT and WIC. And so we did that through doing interviews with farmers market managers, doing geospatial analysis, and taking demographic questions just from stats using like census tract and census information. And I learned a lot more about farmers markets because I guess I figured that, there's a place to get food and it's kind of like a trendy thing. But if they're put in places like food deserts, they can be used to give fresh and healthy food to people who are in like these marginalized groups and disadvantaged communities that wouldn't, have that option to get fresh produce at an affordable price and then also meet these farmers and also raising the diversity of the farmers and the vendors because a lot of these markets are like white spaces of white people who are more affluent. And so I definitely learned more about how they can be used as a tool in communities.
My research was on looking at urban farming and gardening and looking at the potential risks associated with building urban farms and gardens, specifically problems that you might run into with soil contamination or soil quality. So we looked at things like the possible contaminants you might find in soil, the health risks associated with consuming produce that's been grown in these contaminated soils, what communities this might affect, and possible solutions. So I learned a lot about the potential to make urban areas more sustainable. I had heard about urban gardening and farming a bit before, through classes, but I wasn't aware of how widespread of an idea it was. And we got to learn more about that through interviewing urban farmers and gardeners, and also interviewing professionals who have specialized in researching soil health or soil quality. And that was really exciting because I thought that urban gardening was an interesting concept, and seeing that people are embracing this as a solution for making urban areas more sustainable and and as a solution for areas that are food insecure. And even within my hometown, I found that there are a couple of urban gardens and farms. So yeah, that was a really exciting thing to discover.
Our team was researching food insecurity, specifically youth food insecurity. We looked at a lot of census data to try to make sense of the key factors to why youth might be food insecure in Michigan. But we also did a lot of our own primary research to look at how different organizations and groups have been responding to food insecurity, especially through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we also did some work to look specifically at college food insecurity, understanding that college students are also youth, but a totally different population that has different factors relating to their food insecurity. We found that there's a lot of organizations, of people, of groups doing really great work to combat food insecurity. There's programs like SNAP, there's different food banks and food drives happening all over the state of Michigan, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. But something that lacks a lot is access to that information. So for college students, they have a hard time finding what their campus food pantry looks like, what their hours are. And for families who may be looking for a place to utilize food drives or food banks, some have difficulty getting there, some have difficulty accessing the hours. So a lot of it just comes down to how do we inform people better about these resources, especially when you have so many families who qualify for things like food stamps, but don't actually use them because they don't know that they qualify for them. So yeah, one of the biggest things that we found is there's a lot of great things happening already, but people don't know about them. So we need to increase this access of information so that people can utilize them.
My research project was really interesting because I was the only one working on my project this summer. So it was truly a moment of just me learning how to do a lot of things that I haven't ever been able to do before. For example, it was my first time ever using ArcGIS for my project, which is a mapping software. And I also used SPSS, which is a statistical software. But my project was examining the availability and accessibility of healthy food outlets in urban and rural communities. My geographic focus was Ypsilanti, Michigan, which was actually really, really cool because I'm originally from Ypsilanti, Michigan. So I got to learn a lot. It was actually really funny because I had to find all the outlets through Reference USA. and there were some outlets that I didn't recognize, but then I'd just be out and about with my family and I'd see it on the street and get so excited and be like, oh my gosh, that's like, I just saw that place on my list of food outlets. So it was kind of cool for me just personally to kind of learn something new where I've been living for pretty much my whole life. But yeah, in terms of my project, I got to do a lot of kind of mapping for the first time and putting a lot of stuff together in terms of looking at census data and demographics, and then the location of food outlets, as well as looking at in terms of accessibility, like where bus locations are and if they're accessible to certain outlets. And so it was really interesting to see all the results and everything that I was able to pull off on my own for this whole summer. But our leadership was amazing and they helped me all the way through. I had 100 million questions, so they were always there to answer it, and they're like, oh, it's fine, that's what we're here for. So I really appreciated all the support that I had through this program for the summer, and I'm really excited to see the full report of all our projects together.
Yeah, so my summer research was about small farmers, farmers of color, and women farmers. And I specifically researched on the area in Ohio and certain regions in Ohio. And it was funny because when these projects were put out, I had actually just returned from my fall semester abroad, which focused on small farmers and farmers of color. So it was super fun to just be able to pick that and kind of put it, instead of like the more global scale, put it more nationally and specifically on one region. But what I learned from that was that just so much, so we were specifically focusing on the challenges of these farmers and historically and in present day. And my task was kind of to just go through history and write about like historical challenges. And just I knew from my abroad semester, I knew how bad I had just learned how like agriculture and like the history of agriculture on the world is, and how our current system of like food is so like messed up that like, and it would be so hard to reverse. And I've seen it firsthand, like ruining people's lives, and it just like breaks my heart. And then to know, and then I think this is natural with people to be like, oh, but this is on like, this isn't where I live, this isn't my home, this is everywhere else. But like that brought into view that like the US is a very large contributor to kind of that pain that people in other countries are feeling, and then pain that people are feeling at home. Like there, so many interviewers that I had interviewed were just saying that they were going through like the roughest times, especially right now during COVID. Like they weren't getting support from the government, and they weren't being helped, and they had issues obtaining loans, and they had racial slurs screamed at them because they owned more farmland than other people did. It was just terrible. And just to see that kind of environment at home in my home country is just affirming that like things need to change. And it kind of feels like things are starting to bubble over a bit. Like things have been like this forever, but right now I think more with like media and more with like attention is when things are actually starting to like come to people's minds and start to change. And that's why I think this project was important at all, was because it allows us to kind of voice the challenges of these farmers that wouldn't have had a voice anyways, because they would have never been talked to, which was the point of the project, was to reach out to people who usually don't get to say what they need to say.
My summer research project focused on green infrastructure with a focus on rain gardens and bioswales. And for that, we looked at where they were in the Great Lakes region. So like where rain gardens are, where bioswales are, who had access to them, and how they are, the process of their installation and maintenance. And we did that through interviewing practitioners who installed these projects. And we interviewed them for about 2 weeks, and then compiled like how they went about building the projects, how they worked with community to maintain them and to get the projects into the communities, and their struggles with installing those projects.
My research focus was on food waste, specifically the environmental implications and market solutions for source reduction and social justice related to food access. So sort of similar. I this is actually my research focus at my home university. So I was so excited to be able to continue the research at the University of Michigan and with a group of scholars who were also interested in working on it. It was always sort of a niche thing that I was just interested in, and it was very validating to meet other people who are like, yeah, this is a huge issue, let's work on it, and here are some possible solutions, let's debate which ones are the best. That was super exciting. I've always looked at it from a perspective that's familiar to me about being in Hawaii and how that impacts food waste and food access. And this summer, I was able to learn about the Midwest, specifically Michigan and Illinois, and how food waste is handled in there and the environmental implications for Midwestern states. And that's not something I've ever thought about. I've never even traveled to the Midwest. So it was really exciting to learn about how different areas have such unique approaches to food waste when it's an issue that every state is dealing with. And it was really inspiring to learn about which strategies can be implemented in other states, and also to see how many scholars there are in the field who are working on this issue, and that there is so much data. In my group, we decided to do a literature review, and there's just so, like, hundreds of documents about environmental implications of food waste, of methane gas and how that impacts our climate, about anaerobic digestion. And it was like, oh, this is a field of work, and there are people who are dedicated to this, and I can do that too. And that was awesome. I got really excited when one of my research advisors recommended this article, and it was written by like an all like female group, and I was like, oh wow, look at these like leaders in their field, this could be me. And that had never happened to me before while doing research at my university. And I'm really grateful to have been introduced to different resources, to different ideas, and to something that I thought I was familiar with. I've been working on reducing food waste on my home campus for a year, and that this summer I learned more than I did my whole year of activism. So I was like, oh wow, this is cool.